Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Court-Martail Podcast. Introducing your host for this evening first. He is the host with the most from the West Coast, the Bay Area Brawler, Skylar Greenberg. And his partner, he has colonized, energized, and revolutionized the podcasting wrestling world today. Your Colonial champion, Sean McCarty. And welcome. It is an exciting time to be a wrestling fan. Why? Because it's WrestleMania season. There's things going left and right. There's a takeover happening as we speak. It doesn't matter what day you're watching it, because there's always a takeover happening, and it is the takeover of the Court-Martail Podcast all over YouTube, all over the internet, all kinds of places, cell phones, PlayStations, regular old laptops, broken screen laptops, and intact all together. The Court-Martail Podcast is infiltrating and making it onto each and every device known to man. And because we're so excited here, we're going to give you some quality programming. I am your Colonial champion, Sean McCarty, rambling about nothing, as a good promo often does. And with me to bring some structure to this show, otherwise it'd be off the rails before it started, the man of the hour, the man with the power, too sweet to be sour. He's the guy who got kicked out of a regional ugly contest because he looked too professional. Your friend and mine, Mr. Skylar Greenberg, the Bay Area Brawler.
First off, I won an award for that, so fuck you.
Congrats.
Second, you're relying on me to structure a show. My goodness. Have you seen my booking?
Yeah, it's actually halfway coherent. That's how I know I made the right decision.
Depends on how much I'm drinking that night. Depends on how much I'm drinking that night.
Yeah, well, hey, I understand. I definitely understand. But speaking of drinking, it is WrestleMania season, and this is our WrestleMania go-home. This Saturday and Sunday, we've got the shows of shows. But before that, we've got to get through what's been going on this week. And if you know what that cue means, then you know an intro's coming. Roll it. Coming straight to you from the Golden Gate Garage, this is the Wrestle News with Skylar Green.
Ladies and gentlemen, yes, we have a lot of news of the week to get to with the Bay Area Brawler, Skylar Greenberg, at your service. And Sean, let's talk about the biggest news that has crashed the waves of the internet and made all the people at home squeal like pigs and shit.
What do we got?
It is the announcement that Chris Jericho is going to be on Steve Austin's podcast.
Hooray!
Legitimately, at first, I was surprised by this. And then the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, no, that's not really a surprise.
Well, it's interesting because depending on what has been heard, if you've been engaging in the current internet literature, if you will, you will have noticed that it seems like Jericho kind of iggyed himself into this situation in the first place after watching round 2 of Taker and Austin. And then Steve asked Vince. Vince said yes. Steve texted Vince again, which still is kind of weird, by the way. Steve and Vince texting emojis to each other.
Yeah, it's definitely a different environment than 30 years ago when they were, well...
You know what's so weird about that for me? It's not even just the fact that those two are friends or anything like that. It's the fact that Vince McMahon understands the concept of an emoji. It's like, so you're telling me, pal.
Maybe he's not as out of touch as we think he is.
Well, it's hard to say. I think a little from column A, a little from column B there. I think he's definitely out of touch. If the booking of what WrestleMania is going to be and what I think it's going to be, and already has been, then yes, he is in fact out of touch. But he knows how to emoji, apparently. And as a result, we got Austin and Jericho after WrestleMania on this podcast. Are you excited to hear it?
No.
Me either. Why?
Because once again, Chris Jericho is whoring himself out for attention.
In Chris's defense, I will defend Chris just on this one occasion because let's think about this. I want to pose some ideas into this equation. Chris Jericho, I think in the back of his mind, knows that WWE, well, then again, I don't know if Chris knows this, but at least Vince knows this. I think what this is a sign of is that Vince does not view AEW anymore as any sort of threat.
I think that's clear for a long time, but this just confirms it.
Yeah, because now that Vince has gotten a chance to see what AEW has become, and what it always was, because realistically, Sky, this was always going to be its identity.
Yes. I mean, there was hope that there was at least some parts of the show that would be good. Usually the stuff involving Cody or FTR.
Yep.
But now that we've seen that it is a show run by the Bucks, run by Omega, and even Cody's starting to get on my nerves with his shit.
Yeah, me too. Sadly, that has been the face of AEW, and that's the identity they've carved out for themselves. And to kind of just getting this back to Austin and Jericho, I think that Jericho always is thinking 2 steps ahead contingency plan wise, and still wants to be somewhat in the periphery of WWE just in case this AEW thing goes too off the rails.
I think that's clear because Jericho, he's backtracking. He's starting to put less effort into his AEW stuff. You can tell by just the way that he's doing his shit with MJF is just not as engaged as he was when he was first with AEW and as their first world champion.
Yeah. His passion has definitely waned. But
I don't know.
I'll be
AEW
interested.
Grinds my soul.
I know.
It does.
I know. I'm gonna watch this thing because I'm at the very least intrigued to hear some of the stuff that Jericho's gonna pull out of his ass on this podcast, because there's gonna be some outlandish things said, mostly from Jericho.
Yeah, but I mean, hey, Austin's a great interviewer, so I'm sure he'll be able to get that stuff out. I'm just curious what WWE is going to allow to be aired.
Or moreover, what Peacock's going to allow to be aired. Because that has become the ultimate factor.
Well, as long as, Chris Jericho doesn't wear blackface or say the N-word, I think he'll be fine.
Well, we'll see after all of the footage is released, or all of the allegedly by SummerSlam. But we will see just how much of it ends up making air and how much they decide to take out.
Yep. Now, speaking of AEW, as you have referenced earlier, NXT TakeOver is doing night 1 of their WrestleMania show on April 7th. And to counter-program, AEW is bringing back Mike Tyson.
Now, in all fairness, because this does release on the Friday, at the time of the recording, that is happening as we speak. So we don't know what is happening on this show, but whatever it is, this is what we know so far, is that Tyson is on AEW, and NXT has got, what is it, Stand and Deliver?
Stand and Deliver.
Night 1, because it's over 2 nights now, right? If I'm not mistaken?
Yes, it is.
So, do you think that this would work for AEW? Because this is the last time that NXT is going to be on Wednesday nights, I believe.
It is, because starting either next week or the week after, they're going to be moving to Tuesdays, and the NHL is going to take that Wednesday night time slots.
Right.
If anything, and this is a scenario I thought of, there may actually be the possibility where AEW will lose fans because more of them will tune in to watch NHL hockey games than they will NXT.
That's an interesting thought, but I'm going to counter with this. The NHL lost 65% of its television viewership last year. I don't know how much, you and I are hockey fans, Sky, but I don't know just how much the NHL is going to change the needle with AEW, because most of the people who were undecided about NXT or AEW are already hardcore wrestling fans and would watch both if they could.
I know that's true, but it's a debate to have. But I don't know how much AEW is going to get a bump from having Mike Tyson be on their show, and how much of a bump they're going to have from not having to deal with NXT. Their ratings are between 700 to 800,000 people. NXT is around 650. So you may get a bump of like maybe 100 or 200,000, but you're not going to hit to 1 million. That's for sure.
Well, and my thing is, if Shaq wasn't going to do it, is Mike Tyson that much bigger a name right now? It's definitely more a name in the combat sports world, but is he that much bigger a name to draw that many more fans?
At least Tyson has more professional wrestling history than Shaq does, but
true.
But it's not like it's gonna get him so much of a. I don't know. It's not gonna get him that much of a bump. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
It'll be interesting. I think that this one can go either way. I think it was smart of AEW to do something. And because they don't want any, and then because TNT has basically put the hammer down and said we don't want any more surprises. And in all fairness, Tyson is not the kind of guy you don't advertise.
But that's an interesting note, Sean, and I was about to talk about that next. The fact that TNT has done their first meddling with AEW programming and saying, hey, after this thing debut, which was a surprise, we don't want you to do any more surprises. Advertise beforehand so we can take advantage of the ratings.
I honestly, it's interesting. I'm sure that you've heard Corny's take on this by now.
Yes, but here's my thing, is that if TNT is starting to get involved and saying, hey, you need to bump up the ratings, so don't do any surprises, advertise in beforehand, you think TNT is starting to get some cold feet about AEW?
I think that they expected some level of growth or at least a level of stagnation. If they were consistently doing 1 million views, I don't think they ever would have had this problem because they're getting 1 million people to watch the program. However, we're in a case now where the booking has been so bad on this show that even AEW hardcores are starting to go, I don't really want to see this anymore.
Right, at least, and I'm going to make this comparison, at least TNA got to at least 4 or 5 years of consistent growth until they became the size that AEW currently is. But AEW, they started big, and now they're going smaller and smaller and smaller. They've lost a third of the audience, if you think about it, because they used to have 1 million. Now they're at 700,000.
Yeah. And really, a part of that, I think a big part of that audience was, A, they're just purely out of curiosity, and B, was hoping that any one of these stars could get over, at least in TNA's defense. Say what you want about Jarrett's Reign of Terror, but Jarrett's Reign of Terror brought viewership in along with the X Division, and along with a lot of the new things that made it unique. There's nothing on AEW that is wholly unique. Except that they do a bunch of garbage.
But the garbage was not even unique itself because a lot of that was independent wrestling. So if you've gone to any independent show, you've seen what AEW does. It's nothing new.
Yeah, it's just an indie show with a big-ass budget and an erratic booking.
It's recycled Vince Russo garbage because a lot of Tony Khan's playbook as a booker is to borrow tropes from Vince Russo and repeat them on and on again.
And yet I almost guarantee that Tony Khan would be like, oh, Vince Russo's awful. He did such terrible things to the wrestling business. I guarantee you, Tony Khan probably hates Vince Russo, and that is one of the most hysterical things I could possibly conceptualize. Because they are the same person. It's like that meme from The Office, where it's like they wanted to show the difference between these two pictures, and one's Tony Khan and one's Vince Russo, and then there's Pam going, they're the same picture.
Exactly. Speak it, Sean. Speak the truth.
it's in fact, we saw it at Revolution. We had a Russo counter.
It's not even Revolution. It's all their TV shows have to end with someone getting attacked from behind, or someone being kidnapped, or a hot start, or promos that go on forever until someone interrupts it.
Or promos that don't go anywhere. They get about 6 seconds in and then somebody interrupts it. Nobody ever finishes a promo.
No finished promos, backstage attacks, hospitalizations, kidnappings. They just do the same stuff over and over and over again. There's no creativity to it.
No, and that's what happens when you've got guys who decided to be marks for themselves as opposed to learning how to actually do or actually practicing what you know how to do because you think that your own stuff is better than the stuff that was working for the previous 70 years.
Exactly. It's going to make everyone look bad. And the talents you do have to actually look good are going to end up looking like MJF on the last Dynamite with his head in the toilet after Chris Jericho gave him a s'more lead.
Well, it's all going to come to a head soon, folks. Get ready, because AEW, you thought the Mega Powers exploding was going to be fun. Just wait till the executive vice presidents implode. That's going to be some television. That's going to be some quality television.
Only Khan is paying millions of dollars for this shit.
Yep. Joey Janela has a 3-year guaranteed contract.
But speaking of cons, we're going to shift over to WWE's con.
Yes. So weird.
That's a great thing.
It's so weird.
So, WWE executive Nick Khan, no relation, gave an interview in which he was talking about the potential returns of Becky Lynch and Ronda Rousey.
Oh?
And saying how WWE is optimistic that both could return and why they are the future of the women's division.
Okay. How am I going to phrase this politely? Becky Lynch, I would love to see back. That's not the one I'm having umbrage with. Ronda Rousey is a disrespectful bitch and should never step foot in a wrestling ring again.
But Sean,
there's no buts.
Power, the money making.
I don't care. Tell me truthfully, is Ronda Rousey even a draw or a ratings boost at this point?
She used to be.
She used to be, but do you think right now she would seriously make any sort of difference in pro wrestling? With the way it is?
No.
No. At this point, I don't think there's anybody who can truly bring viewership up in pro wrestling without doing some sort of hard reset. But not with the guys that we've got, not with the companies that we've got, and not with the way that the divisions are booked in either case.
Right, and I remember you specifically cutting a promo on Ronda Rousey, maybe a year or so ago, about all the reasons why you hated her.
Yeah, and that hasn't changed. Because she's still just as disrespectful to the business and to what the business used to represent. If you've followed her Instagram at all, or anytime she mentions pro wrestling, it's always in a "I'm better than it" context. And why anybody would do this, I've got to work at faking it more lines and that kind of garbage that just totally undervalues why anyone would ever do it. And as someone who's been a wrestling fan his entire life, from the time he was 4 years old, I take serious issue with that, where I would seriously challenge Ronda to a fight. I would get knocked the fuck out by Ronda Rousey if that means I could fight her for saying what she said about my professional wrestling. That's how much I hate this fucking bitch. She could rot in a hole.
I want to hear more of Sean's vitriol and anger and destruction about Ronda Rousey. Go back. And we'll put that video link in the description.
Sure will.
And you can hear all of Sean's opinions about Ronda fucking Rousey.
Sure will. Yes, because I'll spend 40 minutes talking about it if I had to, but I don't like getting that angry for that long amount of time.
Exactly. Now, let me give my opinion, because I haven't given my opinion about Ronda Rousey.
Please do.
So, Ronda Rousey comes in. She's a former UFC champion, one of the most dominant UFC bantamweight women's champions of all time. And she was given everything on a silver platter. Yep. She was given a WrestleMania match spotlight with Triple H, Kurt Angle, and Stephanie McMahon.
Which was great. In all fairness, that was a good match.
It was her best work, and that's not good because it's her first work.
True. True.
Was given the opportunity to be championship match, her second match, and by her third match, she was champion. She went on a 6 to 8 month title reign, and all this time, my opinion of her kept going down and down and down, just because her personality sucks. She tries to play this character where she's so sympathetic because she worked hard, but the fans hate her, but she's going to work through it anyways. No. The fans hate you because you're disrespectful. You don't appreciate what you've been given. You don't like the fact that you have to work hard in order to make professional wrestling look good. You don't get along with people. Everyone hates your guts, including every person you've ever been in the ring with. You've been threatened by other coworkers to be fought because you've hurt other people. Nia Jax is willing to kick your ass over hurting Alexa Bliss. When you upset Nia Jax, you know you're in some shit. Ronda Rousey, you and your piece of shit husband, because he's also a piece of shit and also a cunt apparently, can go fuck off to your farm. I don't care about you. Stay away from professional wrestling, and if you do come back, I hope you get your arm broken.
And you thought that I was cutting it close. But this guy right here, he never had the chance to say these types of things. But this is the kind of thing that Ronda Rousey, and if they had just let Ronda be Ronda and had her go, yeah, I don't care about this business. You all do fake shit, and I'm the real fighter. I'm a real fighter amongst a bunch of fake, phony pieces of garbage. So yeah, this is going to be a breeze. I'm going to be paid lots of money to beat these fake wrestlers so I can win the belt and make more money. If they just led with that, I'd probably like her a lot more. Because then she'd be feeding into why everybody hates her. UFC, nobody takes her seriously in UFC.
I mean, they used to, but then she lost one match, and then she cried about it.
For 2 years! She cried about it for 2 years, and then decided that that was too tough for her, so she went to WWE, and then started knocking WWE for being fake.
No, Sean. You have overgone that thing. She cried for 2 years, and then immediately got a rematch title shot, even though she didn't deserve it. For
And lost.
The championship she lost, and lost horribly.
Yeah, immediately.
And it just proved that she was a shell of herself. And when her star power was starting to decline in UFC, she bolted. So this is just her looking for a quick buck to use her name. I feel so sorry the fact that Roddy Piper has to have his name associated with Ronda Rousey.
Well, what's really messed up about this is WWE won't learn from their mistakes. They never do. So they'll keep bringing her back and bringing her back and bringing her back, thinking that they're going to be making more money or just for the sake of having the name recognition or whatever the logic is nowadays to jack off the shareholders or whatever it is that makes WWE money now. So I don't have. Unfortunately, this isn't going to get any better, but I wouldn't be excited if she came back. In fact, I would probably skip everything she did because I would not care and I wouldn't want to see her because I don't feel like getting disrespected by somebody on a show that I'm trying to enjoy. AEW does that to us enough.
And WWE does it plenty themselves.
Yeah. So maybe it's a match made in heaven between those two.
Yep. Yeah. And we will end the news of the week with this tidbit I learned from PW Insider that WWE is trying to work out their match finishes and times to try and have both nights be under 3.5 hours.
Well,
now, Sean, on the one hand, I'm happy about this, but on the other hand, that means we got to watch 7 hours of wrestling over 2 nights.
Well, I guess the other difference instead is that instead of it being over 2 nights, we used to have it be 7 hours just one day, where it was just a slog. So I guess that's better. At least you get to sleep over it.
I remember WrestleMania 34 and having to watch from, I think, 10 a.m. my time until about 7 o'clock?
Yeah. Long show.
How are you supposed to have any energy by the end of that night?
No, and as we'll talk about in our match of the week, the crowds, by the time that they get to the end of these shows, they are gassed unless there is an extraordinary circumstance that gets them back elevated.
That is true. But I believe this leads into our WrestleMania 37 discussion.
Well, this is going to be a little bit more freeform than normal. So the broad topic of this week is WrestleMania. because here we are, it's a go-home show, and seeing how everybody is home, and they're going back to the pirate ship, this time to hopefully actually use the pirate ship, a la Shane McMahon. What we're going to do is we're just going to kind of talk about how WrestleMania has changed over the years, what we're looking forward to, what we don't look forward to, and I've got a couple questions to kind of throw in there. And the first thing, it was good we talked about this, is changing from 1 day to 2. Because we asked for it for quite a few years, and I am thankful we have it.
Yes, because I cannot do a 9 to 10 hour WrestleMania again.
No, that was too much. I mean, it was one of the things that this pandemic really helped, was it forced WWE to split things up. And now I think they realized that they can make probably more money with 2 nights as opposed to 1 full day of one arena. So they're now, I think, realizing, hey, once people come back, they can actually sell twice as many tickets to these things.
Yes, but let's be careful and not give credit to New Japan Pro Wrestling, who's been doing it with Wrestle Kingdom for 16 years.
Well, WWE has made a living off being late to the party to what New Japan has been doing. That's their MO.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny in a way. But that's how, and actually Wrestle Kingdom, that's a really interesting, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I want to pitch this idea and wonder, do you think that anyone else, at least in America, because Japan's got, obviously you just mentioned Wrestle Kingdom, and that gets a pretty decent draw, do you think that anyone else will ever be able to make a WrestleMania type show? Over the course of however long professional wrestling lasts.
No. The circumstances that happened around WrestleMania and the history of WrestleMania has made it so that it is the premier pro wrestling event.
Yep.
No one's ever going to be able to duplicate it or copy it, at least not within an easy short-term span. Like, TNA tried with their shows, but they didn't have the longevity to be able to make it as big as WrestleMania was.
Yeah.
Like, I never saw TNA sell an outdoor stadium with Bound for Glory or Slammiversary.
No.
I've yet to see AEW do anything even close to what WrestleMania is. And let's not forget about ECW and any of the, maybe the territories if they did a super show, but you would have to get so much coordination for that, and that never happened.
Well, and a lot of the times they never really did giant NWA super shows. Occasionally that they, Mid-South would do, but the territories were a little bit different because they were all already kind of working in conjunction with each other based on what they needed and what they wanted and how, depending on who got fucked in what territory and had to go somewhere else. So in a lot of ways, there was already a lot of working relationship within the NWA that didn't necessitate such a major event because the talent was being cycled well enough where everyone could make their own big events, draw big money.
Plus, it wouldn't be the same as WrestleMania because WrestleMania is all one company.
Right. And I don't think that really there was, while they had their big shows, there was too much continuous change going on in the territories to have some sort of anchor like that.
Right. Now, there could always be a possibility in the future that another wrestling company comes up with a show and then it builds over time and it becomes as legendary as WrestleMania is. But again, the circumstances that happen for WrestleMania becoming a pay-per-view draw and then becoming the most important event in WWE's calendar is never going to be repeated.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. It's one of those, unless WWE pretty much just tanks and just disappears, which is just not going to happen. No matter how bad it gets, it would have to take a hard reset, I think, of, like I said before, a hard reset of professional wrestling to come up with another grand event with that sort of stature.
Now, you say that, but there is always the possibility that WWE kind of, like, they're already losing their viewers. If they go down completely, they could, in the future, maybe. The next 10 years are going to be interesting to watch WWE because the long-term prospects are not very good.
Not really. Not with the way the things have been going.
No, it could. In the next 10 years, there's the possibility that wrestling fans will go under 1 million viewers for Raw or SmackDown.
You know, I honestly wouldn't be surprised. I think that's going to happen sooner rather than later. Or there's going to be, what I suspect is going to happen, is that the McMahons are finally going to just sell to NBC, and they're just going to bastardize whatever WWE is, and then the interest is just going to disappear. And they'll probably just end up canceling the show. It'll end up losing its standing as the longest running television program. And unfortunately, I think that professional wrestling is going to have to kind of revert back to its underground roots in order to have a kind of resurgence that we've been hoping for some time. I know that's bleak, but it kind of seems like that's the direction that taking the legitimacy out of it has inevitably led to. Agreed.
But let's go back to our WrestleMania conversation.
Yes.
This show in particular, I was talking with you off the air. I'm not looking forward to a lot of the matches. There are 14 matches on these 2 nights. And that's not even getting into some matches that were bumped off of WrestleMania and put on SmackDown, like the Andre and SmackDown Tag Team Turmoil match.
I know. Which you're probably going to watch later on tonight as you're listening to this podcast on that same Friday.
But a lot of these matches, the booking has been awful. The Sasha Banks, Bianca Belair, any chance of that trying the main event at night was ruined by the fact that they challenged for the Tag Team Championships twice and butchered their characters.
Which were already too close enough to each other to have that happen.
But do you want to make it even better? They did the exact same thing on Raw 2 weeks ago. I called it. Rhea Ripley and Asuka teamed up to challenge for the Tag Team Championships. They fought for the Tag Team Championships, and then they got mad at each other, and now they're going to fight each other, even though they already were going to fight each other.
It's just further evidence that they really did not mean what they said from the start when it came to we're going to take the women's division seriously, because they've shown that they just do not care. They honestly, at this point, I think we could safely say they should not have made women's tag team belts. If they were not going to do anything with them, they shouldn't have made them. And just like the TNA Knockouts belts, it just doesn't work unless you are trying, and you're not trying.
If anything, they have 2 women's championships. They don't need them. You could just put the division on one show, have all the women compete on one show, and honestly, no one would bat an eye because their divisions are so thin that when Becky Lynch isn't there and Charlotte isn't there, it's exposed.
Yeah. And, well, remember how we viewed Shayna Baszler last year? And look where she is now. Someone who actually I thought had the potential to kind of break that barrier. But nobody gets over in WWE because WWE gets over, not wrestlers. At least that's their goal.
Think about this for a second. Bayley was champion for most of last year, and she's not even booked for WrestleMania.
Yep. Yeah. That's, with the exception of her maybe being in the women's tag with somebody. I don't know.
No, she's not. She's not booked with anyone. She's not on the show.
It's just...
So you're taking one of the top 5 women's wrestlers in Bayley, and you're not even going to give her a match?
I think it's just further evidence, and I really do think that it's either going to take WWE tanking or an absolute walkout from all the talent. Because this is... How could they all be happy with this? I mean, well, then again, money. I just answered my own question. But Sean,
money can only do so much. Look
Agreed.
at guys like FTR, like Rusev, like Andrade. They have their souls crushed by WWE.
Yeah.
So and the morale, we always talk about it in the last few months, the morale is down. The morale is down. People don't want to work for WWE anymore. Look at the Hurt Business. That group broke up.
There was no reason to do that.
2 weeks ago. And Bobby Lashley and MVP, they pleaded with Vince McMahon. They went to him and said, don't break us up. We're staying together. Don't break us up. We're the best thing going on. and Vince still didn't listen to them.
You know why? Because they were starting to get over. And people started really liking them. And Vince can't have that. Because WWE will not let anyone get over because you're here to watch the company, damn it, not the wrestlers.
Exactly. They do everything in their power to take everything that's good and turn it awful. Last year, Randy Orton arguably had one of the best years of his career. And how do they follow it up? By booking him in a shitty feud with a clown face.
Oh, I can't wait to see what happens there. I can't wait to see what that match is going to be like.
Oh, God, it's going to be... I don't know if it's going to be cinematic. I don't know if it's... Well, actually, it's live in person. Oh,
you know what just occurred to me? You know what match I bet they're going to put in between Wyatt and Orton and the championship match?
Which one?
Asuka and Rhea Ripley.
Oh,
they're gonna dumpster that match and cut Rhea Ripley off. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope instead they choose the women's tag titles because those already don't mean anything to begin with, and I'm hoping that that's what they use. But I have this feeling in the pit of my stomach that Rhea Ripley's moment is gonna feel so bad after watching whatever Bray Wyatt does to just desecrate whatever semblance of enjoyment I was going to take out of night 2.
I have a question for you, Sean, and this is one I've been debating for a while.
Yes.
Is Bray Wyatt a good professional wrestler, or is he an entertainer?
Okay. Bray Wyatt was a good worker. Bray Wyatt was a hell of a promo. I thought his in-ring work was fine. You know, I wouldn't say that he's no Steamboat Savage or Flair by any means, but enough to get by. You know, if Kevin Nash could be champion, then he was doing just fine for himself. I think the problem was they cut any semblance of him being taken seriously no matter what iteration he was in his first 2 years, when he lost to Cena and then when he lost to Taker. 2 WrestleManias in a row. And then he had to be more entertainer than wrestler, and now there's no wrestler left in him. I don't know if that makes sense.
Any wrestler that he was burnt alive by Randy Orton.
Oh, it was gone long before that. It was pretty much once the Firefly Funhouse started. That was the beginning of the end of the wrestler known as Bray Wyatt. Then it became the actor who wrestled occasionally.
That's what it feels like with Bray Wyatt, and I don't like it.
No, I hate it. He's, hands down, I used to really like Bray Wyatt, and now I find him dreading every time that he appears on my television. He ruined Alexa Bliss, who I actually very much enjoyed as a wrestler. Randy Orton, I wish was not caught up in the middle of this garbage, because Randy Orton is somebody I really respect, and I hate to see him involved in this stuff. It's just, they don't get it, and they don't care. So, I don't know.
I feel like Bray Wyatt will be an interesting superstar spotlight to figure out where it went wrong. I know the John Cena stuff happened. I feel like he could have gotten past that, but you're right. If it wasn't the John Cena match, it was the Undertaker match that ruined it.
And you know what sucks about that is that was a lose-lose situation. Bray Wyatt needed the win more, but Taker also really needed the win too. It was a really tough position to put yourself in with the streak ending the year before.
Here's what you do, Sean. You don't put them in that situation.
Yeah.
You have Undertaker retire after he lost to Brock Lesnar, because since then, the Undertaker has not done anything of note except come to WrestleMania and have a half-assed bad match.
I mean, the match with Wyatt was that was probably the last halfway decent match he had at Mania. That one was actually pretty good. I enjoyed that at 31.
No. You are looking back at that match with rose-colored glasses. That match was very boring, and it wasn't very good, okay?
I tend to disagree with that, but you know what? We're going to find that match, because I think it is on YouTube, and we're going to make that a match of the week, because you know what we're going to do? The next time that we have a spotlight, we're talking about Bray Wyatt, and we're using that match as a template, because we will get to the bottom of this, whether this match was halfway decent. And in all fairness, I could look back on it and be like, all right, that sucked, or I'm going to enjoy it, but we'll find out. So stay tuned, folks. And the only way that you can stay tuned for when that happens, which will be probably 3 weeks' time, because we've got WrestleMania review next week, whichever night we get. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then the week after that is ACPW versus NWL. And then we've got a show. So we will find a time. So stay tuned for that, because we've got a lot coming up in CMP, and we're going to watch that match at some point.
Right. Now, let's talk about the two main event matches, because I feel like they're the only two that you and me actually care about.
Yes,
let's start with night one's Bobby Lashley versus Drew McIntyre.
This match doesn't feel nearly as good to me as it should, and I'm not sure why.
Because they still screwed up the booking.
Probably the build. Yeah, probably the build. Because that's something I wanted to talk about at WrestleMania. The build to this show is arguably maybe the worst they've ever had. It's made no sense. None of these matches have made sense in the overall context. And they've done things like destroy the only faction that would have... that actually would have made a difference and would have really enjoyed to see that. And... now, as much as I want to see Drew get that big win, I don't like it being at Bobby's expense.
That's the thing. That's the thing that we're all dreading, is the fact that we feel like Bobby Lashley's moment to shine is just going to be as a transitional champion to get the title back on Drew. In
all fairness, Sky, I honestly don't think that giving Drew back the belt is the right move here.
I think that's the same thing. If anything, what they should do is have Bobby Lashley retain and have Drew McIntyre turn heel and attack Bobby Lashley.
Or just have Drew McIntyre do something else. Or go somewhere else. Or do one of those weird shakeups you do randomly and pop him over to SmackDown. Or something.
That would be interesting. But I think there's more money to be drawn from an extended Bobby Lashley-Drew McIntyre feud. But that will only work, I think, if you turn Drew heel. Because we've seen Drew as a babyface for a year and a half now, and it's good, but it's starting to run its course.
It's getting
so maybe
stale.
Have him turn heel and maybe freshen up his character a little bit, get a little bit more intensity from him, and have Bobby Lashley be the dominant face champion for a year.
My issue with that is that they don't know what Lashley is right now. They can't decide. Because they just had the Hurt Business breakup, but the way that Cedric Alexander and Shelton Benjamin did it, they were supposed to be the baby faces. So they're still booking Lashley as a heel. So unless, which would be a real fun idea, you try and execute a double turn at Mania Night 1, which I don't think they have the capacity or the attention span to do, I think this is going to fall a little bit flatter than we want it to, and that's an honest shame.
There is an interesting idea. Okay. And I want you to get into how I would book it, okay?
Yeah.
Have double turn and have Drew McIntyre win by cheating. Have Bobby Lashley go back to Cedric Alexander and Shelton Benjamin saying he's sorry about what happened. He never really meant for the Hurt Business to go away. He was just blinded by the fact that he was world champion and the pressure got to him. And he wants his brothers back. And he needs their help in order to beat Drew McIntyre. Now, Drew McIntyre, you can give him a couple of minions, and then you can lead to a faction war between Drew McIntyre's group and Bobby Lashley's Hurt Business. And that could help get Bobby Lashley back to being a favorable babyface and eventually take the title away from him, maybe at SummerSlam.
It's going to be, that's better than whatever it is they would be doing and what they're going to be doing. Because maybe I'm wrong, but if Drew wins as the babyface and Bobby goes back to chasing the title from Drew, I just don't see Bobby winning it back from him. And that's the thing that makes me feel bad about this whole thing.
And the fans may end up booing Drew McIntyre if he wins, and his coronation part 2 is going to fall flatter than a plateful of kiss.
Yeah. In the most admirable words of one Jim Cornette.
Yes. And then let's talk about the other night 2 matchup main event. Roman Reigns versus Edge and Daniel Bryan.
God, I don't know how to feel
come around on the fact that it's a triple threat, right?
Yes. I don't know how to feel about this match either. Because part of me really just wanted to see a one-on-one match between either Edge and Daniel Bryan or Roman Reigns and Edge. Personally, I would have rather seen a singles match between the two of these guys. But this is what we got instead. And what would have been nice about this is if, shockingly, Daniel Bryan beat Roman Reigns and then faced Edge at Mania, but then we kind of end up in the same position, wouldn't we? Because Reigns would have to be in the main event still.
I mean, yes, but at least this time Roman Reigns has earned it with his work.
Yes, yeah. Roman Reigns is probably the most exciting part of this 3-man contingent, something that I would not have believed to have been true just a year and a half prior.
Yep.
But it's going to be interesting to see what they finally do with Edge. I think Edge is inevitably going to just turn heel.
Well, he's already turned heel by attacking Roman Reigns and Daniel Bryan.
Well, kind of. He went from babyface to tweener. I don't think he's full-fledged turned yet.
You haven't watched the recent SmackDowns, and I can confirm to you that Edge is a heel, and he is the ultimate opportunist again, which actually, when you think about it, makes sense because Edge is a better heel than a babyface.
Always has been. Always has been.
Yep.
His promos are just better. He can make, some of the times, the way that he said it just made him sound like a piece of total garbage. And I loved it. It's like he was so good at that.
Yep. But it's just, this triple threat storyline, to me, is really interesting and really exciting. And I'm happy to watch this match because all 3 guys are going to knock it out of the park.
Oh, it's going to be good.
It is going to be WWE formula.
And at the very least, it's not like this has been where Daniel Bryan... It doesn't feel so much like when Bryan was in this position at WrestleMania 30 because it's not like Bryan was consistently chasing the title and fighting the authority throughout this entire thing. Bryan just happened to stumble upon this with his good work. And now he's here.
Right, but also the recognition that Daniel Bryan is one of the best wrestlers in the world, and he should be fighting for the World Championship. And this match, I think it's going to tear the house down, and I think it may be the best match of the weekend.
I think it definitely has the potential to be that. What, you don't think Shane McMahon and Braun Strowman in a steel cage is going to steal the show?
No. Am I excited to watch Bad Bunny and Daniel Bryan versus The Miz and John Morrison?
I am excited for Cesaro and Seth Rollins, though. That will be the sleeper match of the show.
I would have said Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn would be the sleeper of the show, but then Logan Paul got added to it.
Yeah, I'm not even going to get into that. Let's not get into that. I don't want to get my blood a-boiling. We already did that bad enough last week.
It's kind of interesting how that main event for night 2 kind of harkens back to a match that happened 7 years ago at WrestleMania 30.
Wait, you're talking about the one that we just reviewed? Or we're about to review? You know what time it is. I know what time it is. Roll it. What time is it? It's the fight, it's the brawl, it's the match of the week. It's tonight, watch along with the son of a beat. It's one fall, the down for the 1, 2, and 3. So don't stall, hang on to the edge of your seat. We got a punch and a flip and a powerbomb too. All the moves and the stars are all under review. See the babyface cheer and the heels get heat. This is wrestling at its peak. It's the match of the week. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. Thankfully, the Road Dogg is okay, so shout out to you. But we are not talking about the Road Dogg. We are talking about the one and only WrestleMania 30 main event match of the week. It is Daniel Bryan versus David Batista, even though he wasn't wearing blue, versus Randall Keith Orton for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. And I have not seen this, I think, since it happened. Boy, what a match this was.
Boy, what a match it was. And you forget a lot of things that happened in that match. But once you start watching it, you can't help but feel like getting gripped into the moment.
It's so fun. It's really a fun matchup. And for the fact that WWE stumbled upon this success because they had no choice but to put Daniel Bryan in here, this is another match where context really matters for why this match felt as important as it did.
Right, because at the time, CM Punk was the second biggest face in the company besides John Cena, but he left at the Royal Rumble because he took his ball and walked home.
Yep.
And they needed another big babyface star behind John Cena, and Daniel Bryan was the next most likely one, so they decided to push him.
And boy, that was so... Well, they had no choice because they saw how Batista was booed to smithereens when he came back and the main event was going to be Orton and Batista. They knew it was going to tank. They knew that everybody was behind Daniel Bryan and finally executed it for Daniel Bryan. But then we're like, oh yeah, this was long-term storytelling. We had this planned all along. No, you didn't.
At least you did the right thing. Let's give them credit there.
I will, absolutely. And obviously this, and the other part of the context of this match is that they watched the streak end earlier. This crowd was gassed, but they were not going to be gassed for Daniel Bryan.
Not only that, but they were so down because The Undertaker looked so bad in that match.
Yeah.
The crowd needed a picker-upper. They needed to be sent home happy.
Yeah.
And that's what happened in this match. But you skipped the intros for this match because it's 35 minutes, and the entrances were 9 minutes long.
9 minutes of intro. Orton's was half of that.
And I was just like laughing at the fact that Orton had a live band play for him, and he took 5 minutes to walk to the goddamn ring.
That was Rev Theory, by the way, who plays voices that they actually got, and they actually halfway sounded decent, unlike half of the people that they have perform at WrestleMania for intros. They actually sounded almost like their studio sound, which was pretty darn good.
Yes, it was, and I really appreciated the song. And then Batista comes out. No Machine Gun Batista, which is why he lost this match.
Always.
If Batista had done the Machine Gun Pyro, he would have won the match. Just saying.
Almost guaranteed. That's kind of the way that it goes with Batista.
And then Daniel Bryan comes out, and he has his arm wrapped up in a bandage because on the first match of WrestleMania 30, he defeated Triple H, but Triple H worked him.
And that was a 25-minute match as well, with a post-match beatdown.
The double match night.
That's right. And amazing. And this is not the first instance in any way of somebody wrestling 2 matches in one WrestleMania. If you recall the WrestleMania 4 tournament, where Randy Savage wrestled 4 matches in one night, that was a 16-match card. That WrestleMania 4.
But I think the difference is that Randy Savage's matches did not meet the length of Daniel Bryan's 2 matches.
No.
Nor did Macho Man take the punch that Daniel Bryan did tonight.
No, and he took a hell of a beating from all of those guys, even though the nastiest bump went to Orton, but we'll get to that in a minute. They knock out Daniel Bryan at first, and then Michael Cole, who did a really good job here. I have to say, this was right before Cole, well, this was after Cole was super insufferable with the heel turn, but he was doing okay here. Better than he normally is.
Well, this was after he stopped playing that heel character because I believe 4 or 5 months before Jerry the King Lawler had his heart attack.
Well, this was I think Jerry's was 2012? 2012, 23. It was right in that vicinity. So Cole had, within the past year or two, had gone back to being the straight man, so to speak, of the commentary.
And the way he was talking, they definitely got him to have as much emotion as he possibly could for this, because they needed him to have that emotion to really carry the match and carry it for Daniel Bryan and make him sympathetic.
Yeah, and them talking the entire time about how Orton and Batista really wanted this to be one-on-one, and Daniel Bryan is such a thorn in the side. But the entire matchup, they couldn't help themselves but have to deal with Daniel Bryan and him constantly coming back. It was really well done by the commentary to add to the match, as opposed to what they do now, which makes it feel like you can't watch the match listening to them.
Yep, JBL was doing a great job being the heel mouthpiece as it was. More entertaining than Michael Cole's heel piece.
Yes, and I do like the fact that JBL gave a little reference to Ron Garvin when Randy Orton was doing those stomps, those timed out stomps, because that was a Ronnie Garvin thing to do.
Yep. And then the Harley Race knee.
Yep. And but what's so funny to this, Batista takes a really nasty back body drop onto the steel steps. It looked great, but it sounded devastating, and the crowd did not care.
And the reason why the crowd did not care is because Randy Orton's the one who gave him the steps. And whenever Randy Orton or Batista were on top, the crowd was either not caring or booing if they were attacking Daniel Bryan, which showed you how mad that match would have been if it was just one-on-one.
It's just so funny. The entire match, it kept cracking me up that Batista and Orton could have put themselves through a wood chipper, and the fans would not have done anything. But Daniel Bryan could have blown a dandelion into Orton's face, and the crowd would have lost their shit. It's the funniest thing, and it goes to show just how influential Daniel Bryan really had become.
So much so that they overbooked this match.
We bit.
Because halfway through, after Orton, Batista, and Daniel Bryan work a regular match, they have a ref bump. And then, what happens is that Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, what the fuck were they wearing? Honestly.
They were wearing the tracksuits that Randy Orton wears now.
Okay, Triple H was wearing a tracksuit, and Stephanie McMahon looks like one of those, I don't want to say this.
Mistresses?
Okay. Yes, Stephanie McMahon was like one of those mistress teachers who's punishing her student for having a bad grade.
Yes, the dominatrix style, so to speak. If you're into that kind of thing.
Stephanie, you used to look pretty, but if you had done that 10 years earlier, I would have been excited. But now it's just like, she's kind of an old lady.
In all fairness to Stephanie, if there was ever a side job, given the fact that all she ever did throughout the entire of her authority is just emasculate men and kick their balls and make them feel worthless, she would be a terrific dominatrix. Just saying.
Yeah, she would.
Just saying.
But Triple H pulls referee Mike Chioda out of the ring while Daniel Bryan's got the pin on Batista, and then brings in Scott Armstrong, the crooked referee of the Authority, and he doesn't do a fast count. Daniel Bryan gets mad at Triple H getting involved once again, and he pushes Scott Armstrong out to the outside after giving him a kick, and then there's a flying dive and gives Scott Armstrong, Stephanie McMahon, and Triple H a bump, which Stephanie took a bump. We have miracles on this day.
I was starting to think about it because I started looking back at all the WrestleMania matches that there were over the years. Stephanie McMahon has taken quite a few bumps at WrestleMania. She doesn't bump often, but usually when she does, it's at WrestleMania.
Although, I will be honest, that bump was very, very light. She tried to take as little punishment as possible.
Yeah, this wasn't the bump into... This wasn't the spear from Roman Reigns or the bump into the table from Seth Rollins.
Yes.
But in any event, this match...
getting her arm broken by Ronda Rousey.
Right. Where actually she did a halfway decent job, which we mentioned that match before. But in any case, I do give them credit. This match was super fun. I enjoyed the entire thing, and then the CM Punk chants that popped out.
And then the crowd ruined it.
Yep. As the crowd often does. And Batista cracked me up because when they were getting ready to do that powerbomb RKO, which we'll talk about in a second, but as Batista is taking off the announce table stuff, he's literally yanking the cords out of the monitors, like forcibly going over and pulling the, like not giving a damn about the electrical equipment at all, instead of just kind of tossing it to the side, which I thought was funny until he didn't do a good job of it. Because he didn't get him out of the way.
Batista's gotten rusty at doing the basics of professional wrestling because he was gone for so long. So he forgot how to do the announce table spot.
Well, he got up there, and you know they were getting ready for Daniel Bryan to do this powerbomb RKO, but one monitor was left right behind the announce table where it was going to break, and Orton hits that RKO, and if you see the way Orton lands, he lands his back, lower back, right onto the corner of one of those metal framed monitors, and he ended up being busted open as a result. It was gnarly.
Hey, I knew the second that I saw the juice, you were excited.
I was kind of excited. I was more like, oh damn, that had to have hurt like hell. Cause landing a lower back first on a jagged square piece of metal, that's no fun for anybody.
Nope.
That was just nasty.
And then they do the stretcher job for Daniel Bryan.
But only about halfway, which I think was the right move to make. And they waited a little bit before they brought the stretcher out, which is something that they don't normally do now. Because now what they tend to do is they're like, the second that the bump happens, the stretcher's already coming. And it's like, how do you know they need it? It's like you barely had a chance to look at him.
Well, that's the thing, is that the WWE medical staff were like, that's too big of a bump. Get the stretcher on immediately.
Yeah, thankfully they're not that bad in this instance. But they...
Can we talk about something that's really bad that we haven't mentioned yet?
Of course.
I really, really hate it. The fucking camera angles. Vince Dunn. No, sorry, Kevin Dunn.
Vince Dunn. It's both of you. It's both of their faults. It's both their faults.
Kevin Dunn. Kevin Dunn, you beaver tooth motherfucker.
Yeah.
Can you not do a zoom up of someone's face or someone's back or someone's ass?
No, he can't. Because he doesn't. No. Well, now he's changed it up. Well, he does extreme close-ups. He still does extreme close-ups. That's one of his favorite things to do. He loves looking at other people's teeth.
Yes, but it's just like every time we looked at someone, you had to get 2 inches away from their face. Like, come on, I do not need to see Randy Orton's nose hairs.
Yeah, well, Kevin Dunn begs to differ. Because, I agree. And honestly, this match was so entertaining that I honestly glossed over it. Because it was just so fun to do that I didn't even care that the camera work was shoddy.
Right. At least it didn't hurt the final segment.
No, and this final 2 or 3 minutes was really fun between the RKO and the breakup, and then the running knee and the breakup, and then the Batista bomb and the breakup, and the big spear that Daniel Bryan that hit Daniel Bryan's head.
I know this.
But then all of a sudden, it happens. Daniel Bryan gets the knee, gets Batista into the yes lock, Batista taps, and this crowd loses their minds.
Not only the crowd, but Michael Cole yelling, tap out Batista, tap out Batista, tap out Batista.
Which was great. That's what I liked about when Michael Cole was with Taz. He had energy. Like that matchup. Like the matchup between Eddie and Brock Lesnar at No Way Out in 2004. Michael Cole was a huge part of getting that over. Because he was so wanting Eddie to win it, just like all of us were. He did a great job with that before his soul was sucked out of his body and replaced with a ferret.
I think this was the last time that Michael Cole really got anyone excited for a babyface winning a championship match.
Yeah. And this was probably the last really big babyface win at WrestleMania. Back when that was the MO at the time, or at least the last one that worked.
I mean, they tried to do it with 36 with Drew McIntyre, but it's just COVID.
It's COVID, and then they tried with Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 31 and 32 and 33 and 34 and 35.
I'm sensing a trend.
And that just didn't seem to didn't seem to do it, I guess.
I wonder what the reason was.
Can you see a trend here, folks? But you know what? He'll get it this time around. He'll get it this time. I know for a fact. But
if Kevin Dunn had the audio keyboard and he could make the babyface pop or Roman, he would.
that's right. Oh, you know he would. But thankfully, he's not in that position at this point. But this leads us into our spotlight. This was a great match. The final thoughts on this match. This was fun, even if you didn't know what was going on in this matchup as far as the context around it. This was just a fun match, a good one, and they all did a great job.
And it ends with the most memorable moment in Daniel Bryan's career, holding up the championship to the confetti of the Silver Dome.
Yes, that's right. At the Silver Dome. Because that happened on that show, if you recall that segment.
Yes, just 5 hours before that match.
Just a short 5 hours beforehand when the show started. Oh, yeah. God, I'm so happy it's split up between 2 days now. And so we move on to our spotlight. Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan has had a hell of a career. And it has spanned...
that's a great sentence to end on. Daniel Bryan had a hell of a career.
Yeah, that's it. That's the whole spotlight. All right, folks, we'll see you next time. That's it. That's all we had. No, could you imagine? No, no, we would not.
Tune in next week, and we'll go to our first commercial break.
No, we're not going to do that to you. We're going to give you the content that you deserve, damn it. And so I was looking up a lot of interesting things about Daniel Bryan, starting with, I'm sure you already know this, Sky, but he did have a developmental contract. And
he did, and we have footage of him wrestling on Velocity against John Cena, and John Cena wearing yellow jorts.
Yes. What a weird, that was so strange. What a weird time. Because John Cena was also not around really that much at that time either when he first had this. 2002, 2003. He was just starting to get his footing, and
exactly. And it was a weird appearance, honestly.
It was, and really, Daniel Bryan hadn't really gone into his own at that point. And while this was going on, this is the craziest part about this. While he was doing appearances in WWE, he was also wrestling in Japan. He was also one of the founding fathers of Ring of Honor, and he was also wrestling independents all at the same time. Something that doesn't really happen that often, to get WWE work as well as wrestling pretty much everywhere else all in the course of a couple years.
Right. Now, I will say this. His early stuff was good, but I did not like his look.
Yeah, that was one of those things that probably held him back a lot, at that time, was just he didn't have the appearance at that time. And it got better. I think once he developed, it was either he needed to be bald and a little bit of stubble, or just completely overgrown wild man, until he turned into this neat trim look that he's got now.
Actually, to be honest, I like his trim look because it makes him look like Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Little bit. I could see that. It's the haircut. It's definitely the haircut.
Right.
And
the main thing is that he didn't have the physique that he has now. Like his early stuff, if you go back and watch some of that Ring of Honor stuff,
yep,
he kind of looked like a pasty white guy.
That's because he was. There was no tanning happening there. But there is a match. If there's one you should watch from Daniel Bryan, I mean, there's 100 of them that you should watch from Daniel Bryan's Ring of Honor days. But if you're looking for something intriguing, there's 2 matches I would recommend. His match with Kamala, that happened in 2006, and his match with Lance Storm, that also happened in 2006.
Like, 2006 was probably the best year of his Ring of Honor work.
Yep.
Like, it was really good. It started with a match against Chris Hero, and I would also recommend looking up that match, because that was a good match, too.
Yeah.
And then he had the match with Kamala, he had the match with Lance Storm. He had the matches with Nigel McGuinness, again, another great series of matches.
Those were the real defining ones. I think those were the defining matches of his entire career in Ring of Honor, at least.
Right, and it helped build up Ring of Honor to be what was looked at as the biggest promotion, not WWE or TNA at the time.
Yeah, it was definitely getting its own little third wheel following, as it were, and it was helpful because then that ended up helping TNA along the way, because they would mention Ring of Honor from time to time. When, you know, I think particularly in 2009 when they brought in Daniels for the frontline angle, they mentioned that he was world champion in Ring of Honor before he came back to TNA. So it was, and Daniel Bryan was a huge part of that. He was a staple as one of the founding fathers of Ring of Honor to really make that worthwhile. And then he makes his way back to WWE.
And he was on NXT when it was a game show.
And it was the very first season of NXT when it was a game show, and his partner or his trainer was The Miz, which of course infuriated everyone who had ever watched Daniel Bryan. And really, Daniel Bryan was the only one who had a true major following prior to his showing up on that show.
True. And just think about this. First match back in WWE and NXT is against the then World Heavyweight Champion, Chris Jericho.
Yeah. And that was, that's pretty wild to have that be your debut matchup.
Not including the fact that that match is famous for Daniel Bryan taking that spot into the announce table with his sides.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Where he overshot the dive on Chris Jericho. He hit the announce table hard.
Yeah. I remember that. That was nasty. And
then he kind of fails in NXT, and then he shows up for the Nexus angle, which was one of the hottest angles that WWE ever started. And then he got fired by doing something for Sean you've always wanted to do, which is choking Justin Roberts by his own tie.
You know, it occurs to me that maybe that's why Justin Roberts glitches out. Because of the oxygen loss that Daniel Bryan gave him. Daniel Bryan might be responsible for modern-day Justin Roberts. Can you honestly say that you've heard Justin Roberts before that glitch out the way that he does now? And he did since.
Hey, Sean, are you still there?
I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
No, hold on. John, the second you said Justin Roberts and glitched out, you dropped.
Oh, did I? See, he's already logged into the network. It's like that movie Eagle Eye. We're Shia LaBeouf.
Exactly. Which, by the way, WrestleMania 30 match, Justin Roberts was the announcer.
Yeah, that's right. So, continuity, baby. That's all we do.
I wonder if Justin Roberts remembered that Daniel Bryan choked him out a couple years earlier.
I would imagine he did, but I guess he didn't hold a grudge because, he probably glitched out and probably didn't remember. But in any case, he gets fired and he returns to the Indies for a few months. And it was so funny that he ended up going back at the very end. I think it was October. No,
it was SummerSlam
August,
because he came back for that 7-on-7 match with WWE versus the Nexus.
Yes. But what's interesting about this is that WWE allowed him to finish up his independent dates all the way through October. And so his last match...
They let him honor those bookings.
Yep. He faced Moxley twice. He tagged with Tony Nese at one point. And he lost to Drake Younger, who's now a referee. I forget his name now. And
Drake Younger, that's his name.
Oh, did they actually use his actual name? Oh, there it is. Yeah. And his last matchup is, and this is a fun one for you Northeast wrestling marks like I am. His last match, Daniel Bryan's, before he went back to WWE full time and finished his commitments, was a matchup against Shelton Benjamin at Northeast Wrestling, and we do have that match, and we're debating making it a match of the week. But it is on the internet, in case you're wondering. Check it out on YouTube. I'm going to watch it. I haven't seen it yet. But Daniel Bryan and Shelton Benjamin, while they're both in a much younger state, yes, please. Yes, please.
And speaking of that, Daniel Bryan comes back to the 7-on-7 match, and apparently WWE didn't really want to release him. They just had to deal with the sponsors. So they let him go back to the independent scene and let him do those matches, and then after the sponsors cooled off, they brought him back, which showed how much that they actually liked him.
Or at least somebody did.
Yep. And Daniel Bryan was able to get 2 tap-outs from members of the Nexus team, and the only reason why he got eliminated was because The Miz attacked him, which continued their feud, and eventually with Daniel Bryan becoming the United States champion by defeating The Miz.
Which he did a pretty good job, I think, as a United States champion. This was kind of at a time where I wasn't watching the show much. This 2010-2011 is kind of when I phased out, and I didn't really reintegrate until like 2014. So
Right.
I didn't really remember this era as much until I had to go back and rewatch it.
Then let me take over for
Yes,
this
please
part.
do.
So Daniel Bryan is the United States champion, and he ends up having several good matches against The Miz, John Morrison. He has a match champion versus champion against Dolph Ziggler, which he also wins. He eventually loses the title to Sheamus in, I believe, December. There was a weird storyline with him dating the Bella Twins and then Gail Kim, which I'm not going to get into that because that's just weird as shit. And then he ends up not being on WrestleMania 27. He fights on against, I don't know. He fights in a dark lumberjack match, which kind of sucked. And then he goes to SmackDown in 2011, and he drifts for a little bit before winning the Money in the Bank for the SmackDown for the World Heavyweight Championship. And then he goes on to have a couple of decent matches on SmackDown, including against Mark Henry, when Mark Henry was in the middle of his Hall of Pain gimmick. The most notable was a steel cage match the two of them had, which, again, if you can find that match, I would love to make it a match of the week, too.
We will have to look it up.
But I already have a Mark Henry match in mind, so stay tuned, folks.
Yes, it's coming.
We have too many matches of the week that we want to look at. There's so many good options.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
And then Daniel Bryan has this weird storyline with him and AJ Lee. Were you watching at this time?
Not yet. I actually, it was WrestleMania 28, and I saw the 18-second match, which we'll get to in a moment. That was the WrestleMania that I came back into the mix.
Right, what was your reaction when you first saw the 18-second match?
Well, here's my thing, right? I didn't really know Daniel Bryan at that point. I had to kind of go back and learn to appreciate Daniel Bryan, but I didn't really know Daniel Bryan that much at that point because, again, 2010, 2011, I wasn't really involved. But I did like Sheamus from his feud with Goldust in ECW in 2009, one of the most underrated feuds in 2009 ECW. And I liked Sheamus. So I was cool with Sheamus having this matchup. I wanted a little bit more than just 18 seconds. I thought I was going to get something a little bit more than that. But I was probably on the other side of the fence than what most people wanted at that time.
I think it was just hard because at the time they were making Sheamus the Irish John Cena. He was just the pasty, good guy babyface who smiled and cracked jokes.
Yeah, I was happy when he won the Rumble though, but it didn't translate, I think, the way they were hoping it would.
No, unfortunately not. But then again, that's another thing where Sheamus, he's better as a heel than he is a babyface. Not that he isn't a bad babyface, but he's so much better as a heel.
Yeah, no doubt.
But anyways, this was the start of Daniel Bryan starting to do the yes and no chants in the middle of his world title reign, and the fans mocking him with the yes chants or the no chants, the situation. Daniel Bryan getting mad at AJ Lee, and then he goes into his feud with CM Punk in 2012, and then after that, teaming with Kane as Team Hell No.
I hated it at first, but they made me a fan.
They made us a fan because we didn't like it at first, and then they worked their asses off to make us like them, and we're like, you know what? I love you two guys. Stay together.
If not the backstage vignettes and the content there, but the actual matches themselves were good.
Right. One of the most notable matches that they had was against the Shield with Ryback, surprisingly.
Amazingly enough, yeah. But it was a great matchup.
And not because of Ryback.
No. No, never Ryback. Never because of Ryback.
And also a 6-man tag against the Shield with the Undertaker. That was a fun match.
Yeah, another weird one to go in, but still very, very fun. And for a tag division that was okay at the time, because you had like Rhodes Scholars were there, and the Primetime Players were there, and Kingston and R-Truth were there, but it wasn't like it had the division had a lot of depth. And I think Kane and Daniel Bryan did a good job of making themselves, even though they were one of those WWE tried and true thrown together teams. They're one of those two guys that you know will make it work.
Well, they were thrown together, but they became a tag team, which is very important.
Yes.
They ended up working together and becoming a tag team by putting in the effort. And they helped prop up a tag team division that was not sparkling at the time. Although I will say that later on that year, matches with the Shield, the Primetime Players, the Usos, it was starting to come around.
It was. It definitely was.
But Daniel Bryan and Kane lose the tag team championships. Daniel Bryan starts having confidence issues, and he starts trying to prove that he can be the guy. He can be the champion. He can be the face of the company. And he ends up winning a match against John Cena at SummerSlam, becoming the WWE champion, only for Randy Orton to come in and use Money in the Bank and Triple H to cost him the title.
Well, because Triple H has to be involved in the top angle, you got to understand. You know, otherwise, this was a time when Triple H was kind of Hulk Hoganing things, like when Savage won the belt. I hate to go back to WrestleMania 4 again, but when Savage won the belt and Hogan had to come out and cheer with him, going, "Here's the world champion, but I'm with him." So yeah, here's my Hulk Hogan poses, but yeah, he won the world title, but look at me liking him. That was kind of what Triple H was doing.
And the best part is that it wasn't Daniel Bryan he was demasculating, but Randy Orton.
Yeah, inevitably.
The whole time Randy Orton was the face of the Authority, it always felt like he was the secondary boss, the Triple H, who was the main boss.
Well, and that's another thing that was really funny as we were talking about the review of the triple threat, you know, the way this culminated, this whole insecurity issues and the Authority bringing him down until finally Daniel Bryan overcame the odds at WrestleMania by necessity because Batista won the Rumble. The fans rejected it, and they had to shoehorn Daniel Bryan in, as we discussed. The other thing that was really interesting is that they also mentioned, did Cole and King, that Randy Orton, in the context of those three, was a bit of the afterthought. Just the way things were going on, especially in that month or so leading up to WrestleMania.
Yep. But I think Randy Orton did his job well and got the heat on Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan won the championship to the loudest pop that they had had in a long time.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, just a couple of months later, he had to vacate the titles because of injuries.
Yeah, it was not even a month later. It was May 13th, I think.
So
May 12th. I'm sorry, May 12th. He was attacked by Kane, and then he forfeited the belt. He had the surgery on the 15th, and it was 2 weeks later when he forfeited the belt.
Now, here's the thing that's interesting: is that had Daniel Bryan had stayed healthy, most likely the ass kicking that John Cena got at SummerSlam from Brock Lesnar was going to be for Daniel Bryan.
Yeah, and not to say that wouldn't have worked, but it would not have had the same effect that Brock Lesnar beating the piss out of John Cena did.
I mean, it would have made for a more interesting match, personally, but I don't know if the fans would have reacted the same way they did if it wasn't John Cena. But Brock Lesnar, he would have been booed out of the building if he had defeated Daniel Bryan the way he did John Cena.
Yes. And it probably would have accomplished the end they were trying to accomplish, but because people were so sick of Cena, that ended up turning Brock babyface almost. Almost.
Right. And then Daniel Bryan comes back one more time, and then he wins the Intercontinental title, and then he has to retire again because of injuries. And this one was more serious because it was his neck and his head. And
yeah.
That's just rough.
And it was so sad because he had just won the Intercontinental title in a hell of a ladder match, And it looked like he was about to go through a run, and then like at basically the exact same time frame, he had to retire. Like the exact same month had passed, and all of a sudden there was no more Daniel Bryan. And
the worst part was that with the injuries that he had, like revealing that he had 10 concussions while he was wrestling, that his reflexes were slowing, and that there was a small spot in his spine that was broken.
Yeah.
And Daniel Bryan, all he had known is wrestling and major depression issues. I'm not the biggest fan of the Bellas shows. Like, I don't love that shit. But
Me either.
The most real and sad parts of those shows were the stuff with Daniel Bryan talking about his after career.
Yeah, well, because you know what honestly was the hardest, I think, and the biggest difficulty there is that they had him back as general manager, which I'm sure he wanted because he wanted to still be a part of it. But at the same time, would that not drive you crazy if you were doing something you loved to do for years and years and years, and then you just had to watch it? You were still, it's like you broke up with the person you loved the most, but you still had to work with them every day for the better part of 2 years.
Well, here's the thing, though, that he retired in 2016, and then he kind of came back as a general manager several months later. I think it was for the best, because had Daniel Bryan not returned, it would have hurt him more, because he was still involved in the business.
That's very possible.
He was still contributing. Had he had not returned, I'm scared to think what would have happened.
Yeah. Well, and even to Austin's own admission, when he left even in 2003, not even talking about when he came back when he left in the June of 2002, but in 2003 when he had to retire, he even said that, like, the way that Austin dealt with it is that he drove 100 miles down through Texas and back, and by the time that he got back home, the bottle of whiskey that he had brought with him was empty. So,
right.
You know, it's better than that. And thankfully, he did not end up going through that. And even better than that, finally, WWE's doctors cleared him right in the midst of 2018.
And he comes back. He starts proving that he is the guy that he says he is, even though he has kind of a shitty feud with The Miz.
Well, he had an even shittier feud with, he came back in a tag match as Shane McMahon's partner against Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn.
Because Shane McMahon has to be shoehorned into every WrestleMania.
Well, although ironically it was Daniel Bryan who got shoehorned, but for the better, because that feud was a bit dead in the water up to that, even though the Shane McMahon and Kevin Owens matchup was quite good at Hell in a Cell. I enjoyed it.
I find it ironic that if WWE has to save a match, they have to involve Daniel Bryan in it.
Well, he seems to be their successful go-to. And so then eventually he turns heel and does the new Daniel Bryan, the whole vegan kick, environmentalist Daniel Bryan.
The eco-warrior.
Yes, which was terrific. I think some of Daniel Bryan's best work in WWE as far as his gimmick is concerned. It added layers.
It was nice to finally get back to being a heel. Like, he had been a babyface for a long time, and that was good and all, but it was starting to get dry, too.
Yes. And nothing that Daniel Bryan was so good as a heel because nothing Daniel Bryan said was false, but you hated the way he said it. And that's like the true gift of a heel.
Yep. I mean, the guy made a championship that was recycled completely out of natural turf and material, hated by the fans because they didn't want to listen to him.
Yeah. And that's the mark of how good Daniel Bryan is. And then to be able to turn that around and give Kofi Kingston his moment. That
ironic how he was able to get Kofi his moment 5 years after he got his.
I know. But how great it was to be a part of that and to see that. And now he's been doing some good stuff here and there. And his work has always been impressive. That's never stopped. And now he's in this main event once again. And honestly, if he walks away with the belt, I'm not going to be mad about it.
Me neither, because we have to recognize that Daniel Bryan is one of the greatest technical wrestlers of the modern era.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be honest right now, better enjoy him while you can, because he is starting to go on a lighter schedule. And he has admitted that he is starting to think of retirement because he has 2 kids at home with his wife. He's 39 years old, and he's taken a lot of bumps.
Yeah.
So just like AJ Styles, who said that last contract he signed is his last contract, Daniel Bryan, enjoy it while you can.
Well, they always say never, but you don't realize how much you appreciate it till it's gone. Look at John Cena, and how many people are begging for John Cena to come back right now.
And we're going to be the same way once Daniel Bryan retires.
I'm sure he is, but we've got to see how he does this weekend, because it is time now to take our first commercial break. And when we come back, WrestleMania will have come and gone. Now, again, point of order. We have not decided which day as of yet the Court-Martail podcast is going to be reviewing. My guess is going to be night 2, but it could be night 1. We're not positive what the order when we record it is. But basically, the Totally Awesome podcast on TAW Gaming's channel is going to have night 1 with Josh Aged and myself and Grammar Note Sky. And then the second night is going to be, or the other night, whichever one we get, the Court-Martail podcast will be Skylar and myself, and the proper PC Notes Joshua will be joining us as well, so I've heard. So we are going to be reviewing, the three of us collectively, in several different gimmicks, the entirety of WrestleMania 37. So you have a couple videos to watch, but just like that show is broken up, we're going to break up our reviews so it doesn't get too monotonous. So that is going to be the game plan, but until then, Skylar, brace yourself for WrestleMania, enjoy it if you can, and I'll see you on the other side, mate.
I'll probably have to borrow some of Tony Khan's Adderall, huh?
Yeah, well, he might be doing a couple other things on top of that, so don't overdo it, man. WrestleMania brings out the worst in us in that respect. So everybody stay safe while you're watching WrestleMania. My name, as always, is your Colonial Champion, Sean McCarty. That's the Bay Area Brawler, Skylar Greenberg. Happy WrestleMania season, folks. We'll see you when it's all over, right after this.